Greetings and welcome to this Friday's What's Right show. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Lots to cover today, obviously. We'll get to it all. But first, Sam at what'srightshow.com. That's my email. And I love hearing from you. And I know sometimes I don't respond right away. And I have just recently, in fact, was responding to some emails from the beginning of the month. So I'm trying to get back to all of you. I answer my emails personally. So again, I don't make somebody else look at them. I do it all myself. And I love receiving your words of support and even sometimes words of frustration. It's okay. We can disagree. Okay. Now, speaking of disagreement, I'm going to get to the James Comey Instagram post in just a moment. First, a bit of good news, and that is the economy. Things are looking good. Wholesale prices fell by 0.5% in April, largest drop in 5 years, and that is in the midst of Trump's tariff battle. This is a huge bit of news. And of course, Axios reporting, I shared a piece yesterday in Axios that talked about how there were some former Biden officials and administration folks who were coming out and saying how great it is. I mean, it's amazing how Trump is getting all this stuff done. And now Axios did a piece about the hard data, and that the economic hard data showing that tariff-driven inflation and recession fears may be overblown. Courtney Brown, writing for Axios, with major indicators in from April, the month of peak tariff uncertainty, right? April was when everything was up in the air. Now that we have them in, none shows the kind of recessionary or inflationary conditions implied by business or consumer surveys. Put another way, we've looked at the data, we've analyzed it top to bottom. Nothing here that shows that we're going to start to have wild inflation and or recession. Just not going to happen, not based in any kind of reality. I did tell you, of course, JP Morgan Chase, other banks as well, have now backed away from their recession predictions. So the big picture, according to Axios, is that the new data that came out last night showed a steady retail sales increase and a surprising drop in wholesale prices in April. So far, so good. And that's that 0.5% that I reported earlier. So, well, I know I saw the Walmart story too. Walmart, the same day that this data comes out, goes, hey, we're going to have a problem. It's going to be a problem. Now, of course, if you're Walmart, how dependent do you think, you are on China? I mean, Walmart, I predict, behind the scenes now for the past 2 months, in the lead up to Liberation Day, knowing that Trump might very well drop the hammer on China, and then once he did it, I believe that they've been scrambling to find alternative supply chains for cheap stuff. Walmart is a retailer that has made billions and billions of dollars selling cheap crap to American consumers. And also, I have a problem with Walmart, and I loved Walmart for. Some of you can relate to this. I loved Walmart for buying ammo. It was, especially back when I lived in California, it was the best place, the cheapest place, absolutely, to buy high quality ammunition. And if you go shooting, fairly often, like I do, it's tough, when you got to pay a lot of money to buy your ammunition. So anyway, I would go to Walmart, and then Walmart decided, in the wake of, I forget what shooting. Anyway, they decided that they were going to be virtuous and they weren't going to sell any ammunition. And I remember what I said about it at the time on the radio. This is a company that has no moral qualms about trafficking in merchandise made literally by slave labor in China. But because the pressure is on to take a stand and make a virtue signaling position, out goes my opportunity to buy ammunition at Walmart. So from that point forward, folks, I did not step back into a Walmart. Oh, by the way, I went all the time in Utah too. I forget this. I don't know if the California Walmarts, this has been a while ago. California Walmarts, I don't think had ammunition, or there was some prohibition against it, but definitely out in Utah when I'd visit my wife's family, we'd go out there. At any rate, right? They did away with it all. Okay. So I don't really care. Walmart is going to scream. Certain companies are going to scream. But supply chains are resilient. You already see that production is moving to other countries. And the data so far is good. And what's the real story? There has been no Armageddon. And yet, if a month ago, right, today is middle of May, middle of April, if you tuned into any mainstream media program, what would be the number one headline, 24/7, blazing on the main program on the Chiron, a little strip of information running below the screen, in nonstop, basically doom and gloom. You have, I'm going to keep coming back to this because it is a recurring theme. You have an entire media establishment that is invested in Trump failing. And when you look at Trump's trip this week to the Middle East and the enormous success it was, coming back with maybe as much as $4 trillion of investment, dollars, real money coming into the U.S., the big Boeing order, right? 160 odd planes from Boeing, largest order for Boeing aircraft ever. This is, this is good for America. Forget Trump. You can not like Trump and you could admit that this trip is a success, like some of those people who used to work for Biden who went on the record, some of them, to Axios the other day. But see, if you go back to Tim Walz enthusiastically holding up his phone to show Tesla stock prices dropping and saying, "Isn't this great? Isn't this wonderful? Look at these stock prices dropping. Whoa, yay!" You realize the level of dimension of Democrats, that they would sooner sink the country and everything in it, including your savings, my savings, our way of life, than to give a victory to Donaldus Maximus, a.k.a. President Donald J. Trump. This is, it's demented. It's actually demented. You have the media establishment, you have political figures, a guy who was, as close as you can get to becoming vice president of the United States, who's a governor of Little Somalia, a.k.a. Minnesota, right? Little Timmy Walz. He literally could have become vice president, and he is cheering Tesla, the stock price is dropping at Tesla, the most innovative company, a company like none other, responsible for achieving some of the climate goals that Democrats purport to care so much about, not to mention automated driving and things that really will matter in the future. Cheering its stock demise just because it represented a political victory for his party. Everything that has happened this week, okay, has been good for America. Now, I give Trump credit for it because, of course, I think that, I'm happy that we never got to see what a Kamala Harris presidency would have looked like. I suppose if you get deep into quantum physics, there's a parallel universe in space and time where Kamala is president. And if we could just, briefly, and you would only want to do it briefly, folks, you would not want to spend too much time in this parallel universe, I promise you. But if you just briefly went over there and kind of took a look around, I don't think you would like what you'd see. And yet the media that carried water for Joe Biden, who literally wouldn't let anybody come along and question Biden's lack of mental acuity, I'm putting that in the nicest of terms, the same media today actively talking down America. They want America to fail. They're invested in America failing. They were spreading these stories all last month about the economy in order to further drive down the stock market and create problems for Trump as he neared his first 100 days in office. That is how despicable these people are. And I'm laying this groundwork too, because you have to look at what James Comey did. If you didn't, miss this, of course, he went on his Instagram and arranged some seashells. It's caused a bit of a stir, but you have to view what Comey is doing through the lens of everything I just said. Because when it comes to the quote unquote opposition, they are perfectly willing to burn the entire country to the ground. They will advocate for violence. They will advocate for anything by hook or by crook. They will do whatever it takes just to win. And winning isn't some measurable success for us, we the people. It's winning in political terms strictly for them, for their benefit, so that their crap gravy train in Washington, D.C. can continue rolling and they can settle their political scores. Once you really begin to look at what's happening in politics through that prism, you can never look at it another way again. And mark my words, we cannot let them get away with it. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT, the What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam & Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday. We are almost there. Those of you who celebrate the weekend at the standard time. I know many of you here in Las Vegas work through the weekend, and then your weekend starts on Tuesday, so I'm sorry, midweek for you. For me, the show Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., here on News Talk 840 KXNT, I get a weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Although on Sunday, I may be with Alan Stock over at the Emerald Island Casino, talking to him and Tim Brooks, so I look forward to that. Okay. Well, James Comey, let me just... the internet exploded yesterday because James Comey, former FBI director and snake extraordinaire, put out an Instagram post where he showed a picture of some shells, I guess, little like typical shells you'd find on a beach. Nothing too fancy, ordinary shells, maybe some rocks arranged in a pattern to have the following numbers: 8647. Now, 8647, what is this referring to? Well, I think everybody knows what getting 86th means as a verb, right? To be 86th means to be ejected from an establishment, to be barred from entering an establishment. And more recently, it's been meant to describe killing somebody. Now, obviously, putting a threat out there against the President of the United States is a violation of federal law, specifically 18 U.S.C. 871 is a code section. And this makes it a federal crime to knowingly and willfully make a true threat against the life of the president. There are a handful of cases that have defined what the true threat is. Now, as soon as this happened, and I saw it, and I saw all the people, on both sides opining about this, I'll tell you, I absolutely believe that James Comey meant to threaten Trump. I absolutely believe it. But the wrong take for conservatives to make here is to think that James Comey is stupid. Now, James Comey thinks we're stupid, okay? James Comey is a very smart guy, I mean, when it comes to law. And that's part of the problem, because when you have a snake like Comey, who also is a high-functioning individual, he can do a lot of damage. And it's very important in life, generally speaking, but particularly when dealing with these subversive anti-Trump elements, to not underestimate your opponent. I saw a lot of people who I value, who I think are smart, who are commentators, public people, who I agree with 98% of the time, say something to the effect of, "Oh my gosh, what an idiot." Comey is not an idiot. Now, he put that out there, and then was it an hour later, 2 hours later? I don't know. Some period of time later, he put out a follow-up post saying that he had taken the previous picture down, and that he didn't realize it was a political message. And this is what he wrote. "I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw it today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate these numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down." Okay. Somewhere, someplace, there is some crazy Democrat, anti-Trump, TDS-afflicted individual that has guns, that saw the former director of the FBI, somebody who placed himself, okay, again, in the crazy thinking of a TDS-inflicted person, who placed himself squarely in the path of Trump and did more than many people to try to stop Trump during his first term in office, and is going to take a message posted by that individual, James Comey, as a call to arms. I have no doubt about that. But I also don't think that Comey's going to end up in jail over this. And the reason for that is that it really, all he's did here, and this is him being a weasel, okay? He just said 86, "Oh, I didn't know. Now, he knew. This guy went to the University of Chicago Law School. This guy's not a dummy. He's a freaking lawyer. But he also knows right where that line is. And I don't want to get too deep into a legal analysis of this particular statute and the 3 or 4 cases that have defined what the true threat language means. But suffice it to say, my assessment of it, unfortunately, it makes me mad that I have to say this. My assessment of it is that he's going to get away with it, and that he knew exactly that he would get away with it. He absolutely knew what he was doing. So I know. I'm going to get, you guys are going to email me and get mad. And now, I would love for him to get arrested. I'd love to get a mugshot. I'd love to give him some of the treatment that he has so generously wished upon Trump. By the way, here's Comey fantasizing literally about Trump being in a work camp in a prison.
Do you agree with that it would be difficult or nearly impossible for the law enforcement institutions to put him in actual jail?
No, they would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass. And he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population, but it's obviously doable.
He's a despicable person. He knew exactly what he was doing. And by the way, you know how nakedly transactional James Comey is? He actually had a book coming out. That's right. He just put out a crime novel, a piece of fiction, which is, amounts to the investigation and the impeachment proceedings against Trump that Comey participated in. Yeah, called FDR Drive. And so he did this to get his name ID out there right at the very moment that he was hawking some crap book that he wrote. That's who James Comey is. So the more we talk about it, the more we just help him sell books. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Be right back, folks. Don't go anywhere. The What's Right Show brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. I started reading the description here of James Comey's FDR Drive crime novel, and it's cringy to say the least. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Because I had to read it, I'm going to share a bit of this with you. By the way, I'm convinced that his little stunt, 8647, threatening the life of Donald Trump, was timed to promote this book. So here it is. Okay, he got his wish. I'm going to promote his book. Quote, former FBI Director Comey reunites the protagonists of his first two legal thrillers for his strongest outing yet. U.S. Attorney Carmen Garcia, a Latina. Carmen Garcia is trying to take down Samuel Buchanan, a far-right media personality with a popular podcast vilifying those he thinks are destroying America. Intellectuals, immigrants, and people of color. Lakin, how bad is... no, wait, hold on. Folks, Robbie's going to be back next week. Don't worry. Robbie did not get doged. Lakin is here filling in. Lakin, does that make you want to read this? Does it make you want to read it? I mean, maybe Carmen Garcia, is like a boss girl. She's there. She's a U.S. attorney. She's fighting this Buchanan guy. By the way, who is Samuel Buchanan? Is it? Oh my God, it's not me. It's a different Sam. Well, I should, as a quote unquote far right media personality. Let's see. Do I think intellectuals are the problem? Immigrants are the problem? See, this is... well, that's probably, if James Comey listened to this program, his broken Washington brain would think that this is how it is. And again, I'm not calling him stupid. I'm calling him brainwashed. That's a different thing. Comey is a very smart guy, but intelligence is no guarantee of wisdom. I think we all understand that. We've all known someone who is phenomenally intelligent, but then kind of life retarded, right? They're out there. They're wandering in our midst. So that's James Comey. But here's the thing. In their mind, this is the anatomy of a liberal brain. They think that we, quote unquote, far right people, like this villain, Samuel Buchanan, a far-right media personality, thinks intellectuals and immigrants are the problem. I guess it's kind of weird that a guy like me, quote-unquote far-right media personality, named Sam, conveniently enough, with, who is a product of legal immigration into this country, whose parents came here with nothing, didn't get any public support, scraped by with very little, and made for themselves happen the American dream that has made their kids, both me and my sister, into the two biggest American patriots out there. It's kind of funny that we are considered, I'm speaking now for my sister and I, frankly, even for my parents, as quote-unquote anti-immigrant. The whole thing is so absurd. Anybody that, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some conservatives out there who are I just don't know any. I mean, when have you, and you consume a lot of podcasts, you listen to shows far better than this one. When do you hear some conservative, some guy saying, I'm anti-immigrant? We just don't want MS-13 here. We don't want people here illegally. We want people to follow the law. an anti-intellectual? We love brilliant people, but not if they're life stupid. You can't purport to be an intellectual and then spew the kind of empty, nonsensical garbage, anti-Trump garbage, and want us, common sense folk, to take you seriously. Sometimes this program just writes itself, like, and I know you're filling in, you realize that this is crazy, right? Imagine thinking this is a picture. This is basically pornography, this book, James Comey's FDR Drive. Pornography for the weak-minded, Trump derangement syndrome inflicted liberal. So if you've got one of those in your family, here, I'll help James Comey sell some books. If you have a weak-minded, Trump derangement syndrome, afflicted liberal friend, family member, gosh forbid, spouse. Well, this is the perfect stocking stuffer, okay? Yeah, okay. This is hold on. This is great. Hold on. I'm going to continue. Wait, there's more. Okay, the fans of the Samuel Buchanan guy. This is all from the Publisher's Weekly description. His fans have obliged killing or grievously injuring some of his foes. So this Buchanan guy went far beyond in the protection, and this I'm quoting from this, of the First Amendment when he singled out his enemies by name and suggested something should be done. This is insane. Something should be done. Hey, isn't this what James Comey did in his post when he wrote 8647? Trump certainly thinks so, by the way. He sat down, did a quick interview about this early this morning. Listen to this.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant. And he did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard. Because people like me, and they like what's happening with our country. Our country has become respected again, and all this. And he's calling for the assassination of the president.
Obviously, he apologized and said he wasn't calling for violence. But
look, he's a very bad.
What do you want to see happen? What do you want to see happen?
I don't want to take a position on it because that's going to be up to Pam and all of the great people. But I will say this: I think it's a terrible thing. And when you add his history to that, if he had a clean history, he doesn't. He's a dirty cop. He's a dirty cop. And if he had a clean history, I could understand if there was a leniency. But I'm going to let them make that decision.
Yeah, this is absolutely wild stuff. I agree with Trump. And I like, by the way, he's not going to do what the left does. He's moved on from the lock her up chance of Hillary Clinton. This is Trump actually learning and maturing as a president. He's not going to give him any fodder here. He's like, I'm not going to I'm going to turn this over to the Attorney General and to the FBI. I'm going to let them deal with it. I'm not going to put out an opinion. So I'm telling you, this is all, to me, when you actually look at the what the book is about that James Comey is hawking, when you read what it's all about, it starts to be very clear that that Trump at least is that Comey's choice of words was very deliberate. Now that I think about it, actually, I'm reevaluating it. It's almost too on the nose. He's writing a book about somebody out there who is singling out his enemies so that they can be injured by people who are his followers. And Comey and all the Trump derangement syndrome afflicted left, are like this. And I have to remind you too, this is a little bit of history here. Remember when Trump fired Comey? He should never have had Comey stay in that position. That was the stupidest thing. But he had him in there, and then he realized that Comey was a snake, and he canned him. And John Kelly, who was Trump's chief of staff, was so upset about this. Listen to this.
Amid the flurry of calls Comey received that day, he says there was one that stuck out.
John Kelly, who was then Secretary of Homeland Security, called me. He was very upset. He was very emotional and said he had seen the news and that he intended to resign because he wouldn't work for people who would treat someone like me in such a dishonorable way, and that he was going to quit.
What'd you tell him?
Please don't do that. This president needs people of character and principle around him, especially this president.
Yeah, especially this president. He needs to have you stay on as an opponent. And then, just to remind you folks of how treacherous this got, it was Kelly and Kelly only that heard the suckers and losers statement and the Trump loves Hitler. If only I had generals like Hitler did. Okay? These are treasonous, despicable snakes. Comey calling himself, I'm a lifelong Republican. With Republicans like these, this is why Republicans lost every election. This is why Republicans, when they were in office, did nothing to secure the border. This is why Republicans, when in office, when they got elected, pulled us into terrible, awful, treacherous conflicts and wars.
He knew exactly what that meant.
I mean, this
a child
is
knows what that meant.
exactly why
If you're
Donald Trump entered the political fray, is to rid the country of people like James Comey. So yeah, I do hope he gets arrested. Put in a little orange jumpsuit. Maybe they can find him a double wide somewhere, in the corner of the jail there in the yard. Hang out and write his crappy novels. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, the What's Right Show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right. Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Greetings, friends. Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email. And of course, on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find me at What's Right Sam. Excellent. And I always remind you of this. We actually do video now. All these clips are in video. You can see me in my studio. I mean, it's not much to look at, but I'm here behind not just the microphone, but also the Sam Cam. That's right. So you can go on, Spotify for one. You can see the video there, and on YouTube as well. Search What's Right Show. You'll find me and can see all of this on the big screen, however big your monitor is, okay? All right, just letting you know. Okay, speaking of the FBI, James Comey now deep in doo-doo, but also Kash Patel gives an interview saying he's going to shut down FBI headquarters in the Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. This is a development.
Look, the FBI is 38,000 when we're fully manned, which we're not. In the National Capital Region, in the 50-mile radius around Washington, D.C., there were 11,000 FBI employees. That's like a third of the workforce. A third of the crime doesn't happen here. So we're taking 1,500 of those folks and moving them out. Every state's getting a plus up. And I think when we do things like that, we inspire folks in America to become intel analysts and agents and say, we want to go work at the FBI because we want to go fight violent crime and we want to get sent out into the country to do it. And that's what we're doing in the next 3, 6, 9 months. We're going to do that hard. And, I didn't know that I was going to do this, but I'm going to announce it on your show anyway. This FBI is leaving the Hoover Building because this building is unsafe for our workforce, and we want the workforce.
You just gave up a big nugget
we
there.
want the American men and women to know, if you're going to come work at the premier law enforcement agency in the world, we're going to give you a building that's commensurate with that. And that's not this place.
Wow. How's that? Dan Bongino sitting next to him, deputy director of the FBI, just going, you let that one out. So James Comey and his precious FBI Taj Mahal is going to get turned into some sort of deep state museum. And it's a good thing, too. I think the building is cursed. The whole point of what Kash Patel is doing is decentralizing the FBI Because when you have all of the power of the agency embedded in Washington, no matter how much you doge it, no matter how many Trumps come along every few years to clean the hornet's nest out, you're always going to have an agency that reverts back into becoming a political monster. You can't help it but to happen. And I say this because, have you been to D.C.? I have not been. By the way, I have not been back since Trump was inaugurated here the second time. And I have to tell people are saying, and in no small part thanks to Ed Martin, who I guess will not be the permanent U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, that U.S. district, but in part because of his efforts. I mean, they've really been cleaning up the city and it's been better. But the other part of what's going on is that, all these people that are getting fired or let go are retiring, they're leaving the city. So I've always felt that visiting D.C. has been depressing. You just see a lot of wealth that isn't real wealth. It's not like going to, it's not like going to New York and you see big buildings and you go, oh, that was so-and-so that built it, an incredible, businessman and philanthropist and whatever. No, you go, oh, that was my taxpayer money that was leveraged to borrow trillions from China, built that behemoth over there that is actively working to F my life. That's how I feel walking through DC. So to me, it just looks like this giant unwieldy bureaucracy because I understand that that's what it is. And I've always believed that well before Musk came along with Doge. So the less that is centralized in DC, the better. And centralization is never really a good idea. If you go back and study history and you look back at some of the root causes of, let's say, the French Revolution, a major contributing force to discontent among the people of France was that the French King Louis XIV centralized the court in the beautiful Palace of Versailles, and where you had the lords who had their individual, fiefdoms, where they took care of, the peasants and the poor people. But they were there. The Lord was there, and he was taking care of everybody and keeping everything in line. And Louis XIV said, no, now you need to come up to and hang out with me under my direct supervision and I'm simplifying this, but in the court of Versailles. And that went on for a period of time. By the time Louis XVI came around, there was widespread misery. These individual estates were not being managed properly. Hunger spread, discontentment spread, and soon the king ended up headless. Well, thankfully, we've got a democratic system here that kind of averts that. Biden wasn't guillotined, although he lost his head in other ways. But I'm just saying, well, it's not a threat. I mean the dementia, okay? Yeah. Well, but what happened? We've got to decentralize DC. We've all seen or read the Hunger Games, the gaudy excesses of the Capitol. Meanwhile, the people out in the districts suffering and struggling to get by. So I endorse this plan. I think it ought to, certain things have to be centralized, of course, but the FBI doesn't. The field offices can have more people in them individually, and the FBI is a national police force, right? So move it around the country. And we should have, power in red state areas as well. And hire agents and make the mission of the FBI, hey, you can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat, you can be an independent, okay? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your politics are. You're going to enforce the law. You're not just going to go after a Republican president when he's in office. Okay, so it's this kind of stuff that I think is extremely important. So I'm just letting you know it's very it's spot on. All right, folks, I gotta. Yeah, I'm gonna get to. I've got more here after the break. I'm just gonna get to it when I get back. By the way, let me say a word about Sam and Ash injury law. I shared with you earlier this week a story of the insurance adjuster from Hurricane Helene testifying on the Hill about how he was pulled off by his bosses from handling an insurance claim because he was writing an estimate that was too big. It would cost the insurance company too much money. These things happen. They happen all the time. I have witnessed it. If you get hurt, and I hope now none of you do, but if you get hurt, don't go at it alone. Find a lawyer to get advice from. Find a lawyer that will take care of you. And you know what? It's easy to find because you already know him. Me and Sam and Ash Injury Law, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right. Folks, welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., here on News Talk 840 KXNT. So I am going to be later today, do a brief appearance on OAN, guest of my friend Riley Lewis, and we're going to be talking about this FAA flight cluster mess, okay? And we've talked about it a little bit this week. I want all of you. I'm gonna tell Riley something, and I'm giving you a little sneak peek on this because I care about you. You're my audience. I gotta take care of you first. And the gem that I have for you is that there's this piece. It came out yesterday. It was updated last night about an air traffic controller. This is a piece in the Wall Street Journal who sat down and had an in-depth interview with the reporter. Now, I mentioned this the other day, but okay. He sits down with the reporter. This guy is, an employee, current employee. He's a supervisor at one of the centers. So he's not up in the tower, but he's in a air traffic center that basically manages the airplanes that are already up in the air, crossing a particular, segment of the airspace. And he seems like a nice guy, right? Sat down with him, and he apparently is, the lead of the story. Well, I'll tell you what I think the lead of the story is. The lead of the story, I think, is buried. I think they buried it, 5 pages in. But the purported lead, here, let me pull up. I've got the article. Oh, here we go. His name is Jonathan Stewart. And the headline of the story of the piece is, "This air traffic controller just averted a midair collision. Now he's speaking out." Now, it's very brave of Mr. Jonathan, Mr. Stewart, to speak out. One thing I'm going to point this out is that this happened, and he was so distressed that he left the office and went on leave. Did you know this? Air traffic controllers, if they have something that happens to them that's stressful, they can take a stress leave. So he's just sitting at home getting paid. Okay. I'm gonna put a pin in that, maybe come back to it, maybe not. What do I think is the lead of the story? Well, like I said, somewhere on page 5 of this, here's a quote. "The air traffic control workforce is largely unionized, and controllers like Stewart at busy FAA facilities are well paid." Now, I tend to, because I'm in the real world and I'm hire people, I tend to have some idea of what salaries are out there. Pilots right now, for example, fairly well paid, and a fairly well paid, I mean, a couple $100,000 for example, if you're looking for a private pilot to fly a jet, right? Well, it's expensive, more expensive than it used to be, let's say about 10 years ago. It can be higher, $250, let's say. Okay. Now, so I kind of have that number. So when they say well paid, I'm thinking, honest to goodness, I'm thinking $1.80. 180,000, 200, 220. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know what you'd be thinking, but that's where my head was at. I'm just coming to you palms up with this. Okay. Stewart, okay, this is again the subject of the article, going back to the Wall Street Journal piece. I think this is the buried lead. Who isn't, as the quote is continuing, who isn't in the Controllers Union, said he is on track this year to earn over $450,000, including overtime. I had to pick myself up off the floor. By the way, Wall Street Journal just glosses over this. Highly skilled controllers deserve to make that much without grueling hours, he said. Oh, so we should get paid $450,000. We should do it without working long hours. We should do it with more people helping us. We should do it with, I don't know, what else should we be? Maybe Trump himself should be there in the control center, fanning him with a palm frond and feeding him dates. I can't. Sometimes my brain hurts from this. And when I read this, and I read it last night. Okay, I read it last night. And then my head, I had a light bulb go off this morning when I read it again. The light bulb that went off has to do with the circuit around the hiring practices at the FAA for the last 10 plus years. Starting in the Obama era, there was a concerted effort to reject qualified white applicants for these jobs and to promote up and to intentionally hire only people of color and women. And I thought about this, and I ran it through my little brain computer here as I was reading this article again, and I doing show prep today, and I realized something, folks. Democrats view government jobs as their patronage that they can give out to their loyalists. Let me say that again. The way Washington operates, we're going to go back to what we were talking about with the FBI here in the last hour. And if you missed it, get the podcast, because last hour was bomb, as they say. When you look at Washington, you look at all these ridiculous jobs. Some of them are no-show jobs, clown jobs, whatever. You realize they're handed out to people to gain favor or to repay favors, obligations, etc. Most of this USAID scam that's been running in the country for however many decades consists of rewarding politicians' wives, husbands, brothers, sisters, other family members with cush, well-paid jobs that they don't really have to do much for, with very little governmental oversight. Now, you go to Congress and you say, we need good traffic controllers. It's very important. If we don't have good traffic controllers, people will die. Is that a true statement? Yes, I agree with that. People will die. You know, I hope it's not me or you or anybody we know, but it's going to happen. I'm convinced of it. So what does Congress do? What does the government do? Oh, we're going to all these incentives. We got to get good people in. And the agency is hyping this up in order to boost their budgets. And then they use that budget because Obama, right, will put in, and he did, a political animal to run the department. And Trump was frying bigger fish in his first term, dealing with all sorts of crazy stuff. So, you know, that kind of didn't know what he was doing. Then comes Buttigieg, Mr. Buttigieg, who, you know, literally told Sean Duffy, I think I played the clip yesterday, that, you know, when Duffy was coming in, but Buttigieg's like, the department runs itself. Because he was busy nursing his kid. I don't know, whatever. Don't look at me like that, Lakin. It was a thing. He went on a paternity leave. two gay guys had a kid, and they both went on paternity leave. It gets complicated. Okay. Then what do? They hype up the budget. They hype up the jobs. They increase the pay scale, and then they go, oh, we've got this thing of value. We've got this thing of value, and we're going to hand it to our people. But you know what? We can't say that. So what are we going to do? We're gonna hide our true intentions behind a veneer of respectability, which has been for the past however many years, DEI. And it becomes this thing of value that they hand out. This is the real story. This is why we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people running the FAA and operating these radars because for years it was the policy of the FAA to only hire people that they wanted to give these jobs, these very well-paid jobs to. They turned away applicants. Now, what's the good news? The good news is if there's a pay scale that sees you top out at $500,000 a year, I'm pretty confident that Mr. Duffy and Mr. Trump are going to be able to find some pretty dang decent people to go do this. Because it sounds like to me the pay for somebody coming out of the military with previous training, for somebody who is actually a pilot by training, right, and has that experience, already knows how to work radios, etc., knows how to read radar, knows things about airplanes, right, all of that, you'll be able to get good people to do that. That's a big deal. I was worried that, in my head, I thought, oh, this is some really poorly paid government job, $80K a year, $70K a year, and a lot of stress, and I could see why people aren't taking it. But lo and behold, and the Wall Street Journal, I thought business publication, right? Of course, the Wall Street Journal's devolved into a complete rag. The Wall Street Journal doesn't say, oh my gosh, it should be a piece of cake to hire people who get paid $400,000 a year. I don't care. $200,000 a year if it's half that. I don't care. It should be a piece of cake to hire them. I mean, aren't we firing a bunch of people in the government? Don't they need jobs? Yeah. Right? So the real story here will be, the long-term story is going to be the technology. And I'm going to say this, to Riley when I talk to him on OAN, is I'm going to say, look, we got to upgrade the tech. That's where Congress is going to have to step up and appropriate some dollars. But yeah, forgive me, I keep talking about this, but I want you all to be informed and to know that this is, not as simple or not as dire actually as it seems, and to understand why the problem happened. The safety of our air traffic system was sacrificed at the altar of political graft by the Democratic Party. Plain and simple. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT, the What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
The Sam & Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
All right, folks, I am back. Just a quick break. See, I always tell you it's a quick break, and then it is a quick break. I am back behind the What's Right microphone. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian, here Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. on News Talk 840 KXNT. Most of you are now joining on the podcast, which is really neat. I love this. Seeing you on the podcast, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, a few other platforms, but I like Apple Podcasts and Spotify the most. And of course, also on YouTube, where you can see video. You can see it on Spotify as well. Okay. Now, I don't know if have you been to Starbucks lately? I am not a Starbucks aficionado. I love coffee. I typically get coffee here in Las Vegas. I will do a shameless plug, not because they pay me, but because I love Vesta coffee. In fact, here's my cup. Now, I am a clean-cut conservative guy. Look at me. Okay? I mean, if I was the anti-hero, the villain of a James Comey novel. I would be a right-wing fanatic. I'm actually a harmless fuzzball, okay? But I dress, I'm a lawyer. I have to dress prim and proper even when I'm not going to court. So when I go to a coffee shop, now the reason I'm bringing up Starbucks, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but Starbucks is facing a wave of protests from their unionized workers. These are strikes and protests that have been going on for the last 3 days, apparently in response to a new dress code policy. This requires baristas to wear solid black tops and bottoms in black, khaki, or blue denim. That's it. That's the requirement. Doesn't seem to be particularly crazy to me, does it? Now, when I go to Vesta and I get my coffee at my favorite coffee shop, the people that are there, and I love them, everybody that works there is fantastic. But they don't dress like me. And that's okay. I think there's a direct correlation between how good your coffee is and how strangely dressed your barista comes to work, right? I mean, the more piercings and blue hair, typically the frothier your cappuccino is. Okay, it's just a casual observation. So I don't know about this, but what I find so funny about it, by the way, here's a scene of the protest. Here's some of the Starbucks baristas that are complaining that they have to wear khaki.
Hey, ho, ho. Dress code has got to go. Hey, ho, ho. Dress code has got to go. Hey, ho, ho. Dress code has got to go. What do we want? A contract. Now. What do we want? A contract. When do we want it? Now. And if we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down.
If Lakin, by the way, you look at that video. You're shaking your head. If anemia were a person, right? This would be these folks here. They all are pasty white. They all look like they are about 8 porterhouse steaks from being healthy. No doubt, right? These are all vegans. Somebody's draped in a trans flag. I don't want to go into a coffee shop or any business and have somebody, wearing a trans flag. I don't want, and honestly, if I'm a business owner, I don't want you sitting up front and wearing a Make America Great Again hat either. We're here to make everybody feel at home. And one of the things that I'm going to say is I have wonderful clients. I have clients, I represent a lot of people who are very liberal, who we disagree with on politics. We don't talk about politics. I'm the best lawyer around. Who cares what your lawyer's opinion is about Trump or not? He's going to represent you well. We've got an incredible firm. The people that work here, I don't actually talk politics with a lot of the staff. But what would you say, Lakin? I mean, you're in the building. I would say we have a very mixed bag, and if anything, probably have more liberal people here than conservative. I don't know. That would be my guess. I could be mistaken. But my point is, it doesn't belong at work. And I like what Starbucks is doing. Starbucks has to push back against this because I used to, when I lived in Orange County, there really weren't any cool, fun, independent coffee shops there. So, you'd go to Starbucks. And remember when Starbucks went through this phase where they said, our doors are open to anyone. Well, what does anyone mean? Well, in Irvine, anyone means somebody wants to post up with their computer and basically study or work in the coffee shop. That's fine, whether they buy anything or not. But in LA, when I'd go to a Starbucks somewhere in LA or Santa Barbara one time, my gosh, it was the homeless people who would walk in and stink the place up and make it intolerable. And so they did away with that policy. Gradually, you are finding that Starbucks is rolling back some of the woke stuff because they must have discovered it affects their bottom line. If you're going in, you want a coffee, you want a good coffee, or if you're paying a lot of money for it, right? And you don't need somebody to give you a political lecture. I mean, there is change in the air. Look at what happened with Verizon. Verizon has just released a letter today. This came out this morning saying they're doing away with DEI, and they admitted in this letter that their DEI policies, potentially violated the law. This is great. This is a letter that was received by Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC. Remember, Verizon is a communications company, so they are governed by the FCC. And basically they come out and they flat out say we're done. We are removing references to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion from our employee training materials, and will ensure that all training materials are focused on achieving the company's core business objectives, right? Verizon has changed the structure of its management compensation plan. Verizon's annual bonus short-term incentive STI plan has historically included a goal to increase the representation of women and minorities in the U.S. workforce. It's the same problem afflicting Boeing, right? They were giving bonuses to people for diversity. All of this is now ending. Good news. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Be right back, folks, after this. Holy shnikes. Lakin, I don't know if you saw this, but there are some inmates on the loose down in New Orleans. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. This is, I don't know if you remember the Shawshank Redemption. What a great movie, by the way. Great movie. I remember when this was out in the theaters, and I think my dad and I, this was years ago, you had to look up movie times in the newspaper. Lakin, you don't even know what that was like. Okay, the movie times were in the newspaper, and and occasionally, because journalism sucks, the newspaper would get the times wrong. So we showed up for some kind of movie that wasn't even playing at the movie theater that we got to. I think that's what it was. And this movie, Shawshank Redemption, happened to be playing, and we went to see it on a lark, right? Didn't plan to see it. Anyway, phenomenal movie. The whole premise of it is the guy gets out, claws his way, through the soil underneath the prison, gets out. I think he tunneled out. I think that's what it was. Remind me, I haven't seen the movie in years, but yeah, gradually dumping the soil out in his pant leg in the prison yard, just bit by bit. Anyway, okay. So this apparently happened in real life. Just a crazy story here. New Orleans, Louisiana, 11 inmates escaped from a New Orleans prison by allegedly digging a hole and escaping. So multiple agencies are on the scene on high alert looking for 11 ex-cons on the loose. So if you happen to be What's Right Show listener in Louisiana, if John Kennedy is your senator, keep a lookout for these guys. They're probably going to be a little grimy, a little dirty, a little muddy, if you will. Okay, good stuff. Hey, and Lakin, I saw that piece you sent me, the In-N-Out story. In-N-Out's been in the news, and by the way, I talked about this before Channel 8 did in Vegas. Very proud of that. But I said that I told you all that In-N-Out was very quickly removing all of its food coloring. And they used it, apparently they used a pink or a red food coloring in their milkshakes and in their lemonade, in their pink lemonade. So they're doing away with that. They're also transitioning to non-high fructose corn syrup, so naturally sweetened ketchup, Heinz ketchup. Well, here's some more In-N-Out news, and I'm glad you sent this to me, Lakin, because this is great. So the world's largest In-N-Out burger location is set to open on the Las Vegas Strip And I'm looking at where this is. It looks is this over by the where is this? Where's this supposed to be? Lakin. It's beautiful. This is a multi-story in and out. It's like a glass tower is what the proposal is. And I think it's on Las Vegas Boulevard. I'm trying to see what it's by, if that's by the Sahara or by the MGM. Tough to see from this photo. But regardless, if this is true, a very sexy building and exactly what we need. I mean, the In-N-Out that's on the Strip right now, if you know this, right? Las Vegas visitors, particularly locals, I don't know if you know, the In-N-Out on the Strip is one of the very few In-N-Outs that doesn't have a drive-through. Funny enough, it's the one over behind the kind of inside the link, and it's tiny. And I think there are a lot of people, a lot of visitors that would love to be able to eat at In-N-Out when coming to Las Vegas and have a much bigger location. There is a large In-N-Out that's just off the Strip on Tropicana, off the 15, but it's on the other side of the freeway from the Strip. Very awkward to walk to if you're a pedestrian. So I think this is great news. I think it's great news. So yeah, good stuff. Just wanted to pass along a little bit of In-N-Out news. Big fan. I am a big fan of In-N-Out. Now, I have spoken a bit this week about the Joe Biden years and all the people denying Joe Biden was, that they knew that Joe Biden was losing his marbles. And there was another roundtable. This is Jake Sullivan, who was National Security Advisor in the Biden administration. He gets asked at a panel overnight about his knowledge of or understanding of that sense that Biden was losing his marbles. And of course, he denies this. Jake Sullivan flat out denies it. So here's a clip.
What happened in that debate was a shock to me. I think it was a shock to everybody, and I've made that point before.
Just finally, do you think, in retrospect, given everything that's happened, everything we've talked about today, it was a mistake for President Biden to try to run again?
One of the things about being National Security Advisor is that you're mercifully insulated from politics and political decision making. I was insulated from it to the point where, while I was National Security Advisor, my spouse was running for Congress, and I had strict rules about what I could even do to support my spouse, let alone be involved in political decision making, political calls in the White House. So I have not weighed in on those issues and would not weigh in on those issues.
My spouse was running. My spouse was right. Who talks like this? My spouse was running. Well, I'm just. That's right. Oh, it was his wife, right? Who says spouse? Okay. Anyway. What? As a lawyer, I would say objection, non-responsive. It's not a real answer. This isn't a political question. Was Joe Biden incompetent to be president? It's not a political question. It's a human question, right? You obviously, as National Security Advisor, were giving national security advice to whom exactly? Because if it wasn't the president of the United States, then you're doing your job wrong, right? National Security Advisor reports to the president, the chief of staff, okay? But to the president. My gosh. And this guy says, well, I had no idea, and it's a political question. They all know. By the way, here's a great clip of Biden babbling nonsense and Tony Blinken, and by the way, incidentally, Jake Sullivan here, watching him say it, you could see that they're perturbed, knowing once again Joe Biden was going off the rails.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one. The fact is that the consideration is.
You can see Jake Sullivan's sitting behind Lloyd Austin literally put his hand, to his mouth when Biden says that. He did it again and again and again. And this is just the stuff that we saw. obviously, these are people who were privy to far more, I'm sure, more damaging experiences with the then sitting president than we have, access to. So I will continue talking about this because these are the people who lied through their teeth just to save themselves politically and to prevent Trump from becoming president. That's all it was, okay? Preserving their jobs and preventing Trump from becoming president, and so they lied to the public. And Kamala Harris, who had a constitutional responsibility to invoke the 25th Amendment in the event that, obviously the president would be unfit, did not do so. None of the members of the cabinet did so. And every one of those people now ought to be held responsible for it. And this one thing that certainly shouldn't happen as we contemplate 2028 and we see that some people, for example, Pete Buttigieg, are making noises that they perhaps want to run for office, become president. Buttigieg has grown a beard. Buttigieg is on the cabinet. He could have called for Biden's ouster, knowing full well that he was not fit to be president. He didn't do it. That ought to be forever disqualifying for Buttigieg to hold any office in America. Buttigieg should become dog catcher, okay, of Pahrump, okay, let alone president of the United States. And Jake Sullivan going, well, I was so removed from politics, I really can't tell you what it was. You know what? None of these people were removed from politics when it came to going after Trump. These people were all head over heels going after Trump, and that led to quite a spirited discussion on CNN last night. And it's great that Scott Jennings, caught the libs in this moment where they admitted that the lawfare against Trump was part of the resistance and not a legitimate, legal process. This is an absolute masterpiece. Last night on CNN.
They're mad. Why the base is mad at some of the leaders in Washington is not because they're not left enough. It's because, Chuck Schumer came out with no strategy, no forewarning, and just said, we're going to fold on the CR. I mean, I think he could have done a better job of explaining what the strategy was and what we're going to do, but there wasn't anything like that. I think Democrats are learning, and I'm going to agree with you, that Democrats cannot only be the party of resistance. We cannot, we resisted so hard between 2017 and 2024. We impeached the guy. We prosecuted him, convicted him of 34 felony counts, and guess what? He still got elected. So I don't know how much harder we can resist now.
Are you admitting that, that the case against Trump in New York was part of the organized Democratic Party resistance?
It was a Democratic prosecutor, and at the time, I said I thought it was unwise. I went on Fox News and said
there were Democrats who said this at the time.
There were a lot.
Just to be clear, this wasn't. Just to be clear, everybody who now touts the 34 felonies. Take it from Liz. This was not a real case. This was a plot to upend the presidential campaign, which backfired.
I just think it was a boneheaded move by Alvin Bragg, but it's not his first or last one. So.
This is why we invite Liz, because she's a plain-spoken New York Paul who can really tell it straightforward in a straightforward.
By the way, the speaker, Liz Smith, was a former comms director for Pete Buttigieg. How's that? So full circle around, these people all knew what they were doing. They all knew that these cases against Trump were hogwash. They were pulling out all the stops to end Trump. And at the same time, they were also pulling out all the stops to keep Joe Biden afloat, even though he was a shell of his former self and certainly not fit to have the nuclear codes. All right? None of this can be forgotten. None of this should be forgiven. And we come back, I want to say a word about immigration, since we right-wing conservative hosts in the mind of James Comey are anti-immigrant. You don't want to miss this. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam and Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right. One bit of news this morning that I want to make you aware of. Trump's approval ratings have soared to +4, 52 to 48%. Again, blowing a huge hole into the narrative that his presidency is failing, or at least losing support with the American public. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. Glad to be here with you this beautiful Friday. Yes, I want to get to the story. There were a couple of independent journalists that went down and filmed an absolute horror shop down in Mexico. This is, well, I tell you, this is just an absolutely horrific thing. Oscar Ramirez, who is a correspondent for Real America's Voice, went down to Tijuana, and there is an enormous. Well, before I get to this, it goes down to Tijuana, right? And the story here that at least the narrative, according to the media, is that Trump is a xenophobe, right? That Trump just wants to get all the brown people out of the country, and that he's replacing them with nice white immigrants from South America, and that it's really all a racist plot to de-diversify America. Now, I'll tell you what the real story here is, and Oscar Ramirez gets at this by going down to the to Tijuana. He shows off this place that was run by the butcher who dissolved bodies on behalf of the cartel. Now, when Trump calls the cartels terrorist organizations, when he calls MS-13 a terrorist organization, Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization, calls these people dangerous invaders in our country, he knows what he's talking about. This has nothing to do with race. This has everything to do with an unimaginable and horrific level of barbarism that we do not want to see on American soil. And this was just minutes away from the U.S. There may be Americans that perished here. So I want to play this report here. I'm going to have a couple of clips here. I mean, it's just absolutely horrifying. Now, I know that those of you who are not watching, I'm going to describe what is being said here, but this is a small room
inside the butcher's compound where they were actually dissolving bodies in sulfuric acid.
Small little room.
Corner, what you're actually going to see is where the propane tank was. The propane tank had gas lines that ran over there, so they would turn on a spigot. The propane would flow over to here under a 55-gallon drum where they had these burn stands set up, and they would actually boil the bodies and dissolve the bodies in sulfuric acid. There was a drainage trap right here which would catch any hair or remaining bone fragments. And then from there it would be piped outside of this building, outside of the butcher's compound, over into this mass grave.
So, you look at this little room and, well, what is this? I mean, 15 by 15 maybe. I mean, it's not big. It's not big. Small little room. And the containers are no longer there, but you can see the remnants of all the stuff that was installed. And you go outside and there's this really nice, it looks almost like a park, like a grassy area with trees and shade. And that's where this mixture of human remains was pumped out into a special septic tank, the sludge of bodies. This is the level of horror that we cannot allow into this country, but we did under Biden. We did. Because in between all of the hardworking people who just wanted a leg up, there were some cartel members who came over and started doing this kind of stuff in the U.S. and setting up networks that did this. It's unspeakably barbaric stuff.
Grave mass drainage system over here. So now we're outside the butcher's compound, and they had these custom drainage lines running out here to a custom septic field. So the butcher could dispose of the remaining sulfuric acid. Once it got he dissolved too many bodies in it. It was like a soupy glue of blood and bones and decomposed body fragments. So the sulfuric acid was no longer good to dissolve new bodies. They had built a custom septic field over here that had, I believe, 16,500 liters, which would be equivalent to 208 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid and decomposed bodies are down in this hole. And you can take a look over here at the wall that you're seeing. This wall is all the bodies that they believe, that the parents believe their sons or daughters are actually buried in this mass grave.
This is horrifying. And so you see a wall filled with plaques and names, and I think there's some photographs. Over 700 people in that little 15 by 15 room. It's not a sophisticated operation, right? This is a memorial now to people who lost their lives. 700 people. Folks that defend unfettered illegal immigration into this country, allowing people like this, organizations like this, to operate inside of the U.S. This is not okay. None of this is okay. It's horrifying.
But the government of Mexico has failed yet to do anything. They had sent, I believe it was several tons of decomposed bone fragments, which were buried over here in the backyard. That's Oscar Ramirez, the legendary journalist. We would not be here. He is the only reason, the only journalist in the world that they've allowed inside this compound, and I'm the first American journalist because of Oscar. But back here is where they were burying the remains of the bone fragments, and they had an excavator come in and a backhoe and dig up all this ground, all back here behind the building. And they had sent, and I'll send you some photos of it, sent the bone fragments, and it would fill up. Just think about this. These are just the remaining bone fragments of tiny little bones that wouldn't actually dissolve in sulfuric acid. And on top of the sulfuric acid, what's even crazier about this is they were putting onions and garlic inside of these 55-gallon drums as they were boiling the bodies in sulfuric acid, so that the people that live next door, the neighbors, wouldn't report the smell of decomposed bodies. And then over here, what you're seeing is these were their stash houses. In that mountaintop over there, there's another mass grave. They found 300 bodies. Mountaintop over there, they found 400 bodies. And these were his houses. So this house right here was one of the houses that they used to stash the kidnapped victims. Another house over there was where they tortured the victims. And then this house over here is connected. There was like a back door that came in right here where you see all those bodies, all the victims. And they would bring the bodies if they needed after they killed them. They would bring them right over here.
This is absolutely horrifying stuff. And again, this is the people we do not want in the country. It ought to make perfect sense. I rest my case. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. I'll see you Monday, folks. Keep the faith.